Well, another day, and once again, someone isn't happy with me. Regular Double wrote in a post on my subreddit, which you can find at davidpakman.com/Reddit, I believe. David is in the never wrong camp. He says he wants affordable housing, but downplays discussions of how to get it. He calls zoning and tax reforms minor issues, for example. He says he's a social democrat in the style of Northern European countries, ignoring that they have expensive housing as well. I grew up listening to David, but since I started listening to UCLA Housing Voice, a podcast about housing research, listening to David seems all culture war and no substance. What's more important, the culture war or what to do to achieve cheap rents? Well, a couple things. Some people just want to be angry with me, and that's fine. I can be your punching bag if that's what you want. This is the worst podcast. I get everything wrong. I talk about all the wrong stuff. It's just terrible. All right, well, maybe that's the case. But the factual assertions about what I've said about housing are completely wrong here. I do talk about housing, and I am very clear that the number one issue is you need to significantly increase the supply. And when I talk about how to do that, I talk about restrictive zoning. I talk about tax reforms, especially for vacant land, vacant buildings. I talk about all this stuff. Now, do I talk about it as much as a podcast that is only about housing? No, we deal with a lot of issues on this show. We deal with the federal government, state governments, elections. We deal with economics, tax reform, healthcare, all of this different stuff. But if the expectation is I will talk about housing as much as a show that is only about housing, guilty as charged. I'm certainly not doing that. But even the factual assertions here are just completely wrong. Maybe this just isn't the right show if housing is your big thing. All right. Katherine Johnson wrote in on Facebook's and says, thank you for the explanation. I've had conversations with quite a few people confusing socialism, communism, and social democracy. As you've explained, they are very different things. Hopefully, understanding this will calm the situation. I appreciate this message, but unfortunately, one of the things that happens anytime I want to talk about social democracy, socialism, communism, is people start writing in or commenting and they go, you're completely wrong about the definitions. And in fact, social democracy is communism or socialism, or it's basically the same, or it was intended to be. What often happens is when I want to have a substantive discussion about these different frameworks, 2% of the audience focuses on how I'm getting the names of these things wrong. And that really prevents the substantive discussion. Now, there are some people who write in and they go, David, so that the social democracy haters don't get confused, maybe instead of calling it social democracy, you should call it social capitalism. I have no problem labeling stuff whatever, as long as it's clear what I'm trying to communicate. And the problem with referring to social democracy as social capitalism is that most people haven't heard that term. So sometimes by introducing new terms to clarify, you actually make things more complicated. So the point here is, hopefully I outlined 3 different frameworks, which I called social democracy, which is a highly regulated form of capitalism, socialism, which socializes ownership of the means of production, and communism, where the means of production are owned by the state. Those were the 3 frameworks I was attempting to explain. And to the extent that I was able to do that, good. Tech Izzy wrote in about weekends and says, are Saturdays and Sundays kind of sad because there is no Pack episode? And Leah said, yes, I think that every weekend. We have toyed with a lot of different ideas for weekend programming. And the ideas have included, we'll publish 1 bonus show every weekend to the podcast feed. We'll publish 2 old interviews, one Saturday, one Sunday, like a refresh type of thing. We're open to ideas for putting content out on the podcast feed on weekends. It's just, I don't want to do something which then some people will be confused by and then maybe unsubscribe from the podcast feed. Audiences can be unpredictable. Audiences can be fickle. Changes to routine sometimes throw people off. So we're up for thinking about what to do on the weekends, but we just need to figure out like what is it that people actually want. Christopher Blake wrote in and says, Pakman is becoming diet MAGA, like I'm some kind of right winger. You know, one of the really funny things about this claim is that for as long as I've been doing this show, you can find segments about this over a decade ago. For as long as I've been doing this show, every year, there's a period of the year where emails come in and they go, David, you've become much more right wing over the years. And I go back and I do my political compass test. I do the one with like 7. There's another one where it like kind of grades you on 7 different dimensions as to your politics. Every single time I do this, what we reveal is that my politics, since I've started doing this show, have either stayed the same or have moved further to the left, depending on when I do the the tests, the studies. And yet, I still keep getting these messages. David, you've moved to the right. You've moved to the right. Give me an issue, a specific issue on which my views have moved to the right, and then I would be better able to address it. Marilee Williamson wrote in on Facebook and said, as a former teacher of children with learning disabilities, I found this report. This is the one with the speech language pathologist last week. I found this report one of the best studies of Trump's disabilities and declining cognitive and processing skills. Yeah, last week I interviewed speech language pathologist Hillary Shea, and she was really specific about exactly what we are observing with Donald Trump's speech. She's an expert in that. She's not claiming to know what an MRI would show for Trump, but she deals with speech and she administers the MoCA cognitive assessment, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. She spoke specifically to that. She gave us incredibly valuable information as to what we're observing. She talked about Mitch McConnell. I thought it was a phenomenal interview. If you haven't seen it yet, you can find it on our YouTube channel. You can find it on the podcast. Hillary Shea, S-H-A-E, is her name. Scott White wrote in about my disclaimer on Barron Trump's alleged autism last week and says, backtrack, David. Did you mean to say Donald around the 250 mark, or was it a slip of the tongue and you meant to say Barron? Yeah, I screwed up. One of the things I did last week is I gave a disclaimer because the Trump family is so triggered and litigious anytime anyone talks about Barron Trump and autism allegations. I gave a disclaimer where I said, I am not making any diagnosis here, nor do I have any reason to believe independently that Barron Trump is autistic. I glitched and I said Donald Trump. And I got hundreds of emails from people saying, hey, I think you might have invalidated your disclaimer and whatever. Thank you for catching it. Thank you for the legal concern. I did mean Barron, not Donald. And I believe that if I were to be sued, it would be clear from the totality of that segment that I was talking about Barron. I'm only saying other people have said Barron is autistic. It is not something I can independently weigh in on. Jedi Jack Curenton commented on YouTube about the Fauci hearings last week, but nobody asked for Fauci's diary. Where the F are the Epstein files? Great question. But you know, this is something Republicans are good at. Republicans trumped up this entire, we got Fauci's diary. We're going to hold hearings. We're going to drag him in to testify. They created a political spectacle out of it. And this is something that they are good at. And Democrats, unfortunately, are not very good at this. They did it with the Benghazi hearings, the Republicans did. They've done it with so many different things. And it's bogus. What about the Epstein files? Forget Fauci's diary, the Epstein files. But you got to hand it to them. They sort of seem to know what they're doing as far as creating these public events. Beverly Hatley commented about my video regarding when they go after Barron. I think the fact that Iran thinks Trump values his wife or son's life more than his own is laughable. Listen, Trump primarily cares about himself. So it is true. If you said to him, who's it going to be? You or Melania? You or Barron? I think Trump goes, no, save me. I think Trump says that every time. That's true. But here's what is the important thing. Donald Trump cares about being respected and being seen as strong. A foreign country saying they will target or actually targeting his wife and kid shows a disrespect to Donald Trump. And so even though Trump's number one is himself, he cares about himself more than anybody else, of course. The whole issue here is that he sees it as disrespectful. It's an affront to Trump for anybody to try to go after his wife and kid. That's really what he cares about. Beverly's instinct is right. Trump mostly cares about himself. All right, we are approaching 4,000 pre-orders for my forthcoming book, Pay Attention. In addition to the number one printed hardcover copy that I have on my shelf, I now have with me 2 paperback copies. See, these are soft. I can fold them. These are uncorrected proofs not for sale. We call them galleys in the industry, a nasty term. I'll also give these away. Okay. So I've been saying, if you pre-order this book in any format, you get a signed copy, you just get the regular hardcover, you get an audiobook, you get a Kindle book, whatever. Send your pre-order receipt to info@davidpakman.com. And on the day the book comes out, we will pick one person who submitted their receipt, and I will dedicate this specific copy, the first ever printed hardcover copy, and send it to you. I'll do the same with these 2 uncorrected proofs. This is like the number one prize is the hardcover book. And then I've got 2 flaccid and floppy paperbacks, which we will also give away. Send all receipts if you want to be entered in the raffle to info@davidpakman.com. We've got a bonus show coming up. We're doing it all. Thanks for watching. Check out another one of our videos and make sure to subscribe so YouTube keeps our content in your feed. And if you prefer audio, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple.